Hi guys, and welcome to this week's episode. As you know, we're partnered with QT, which is a social media company that tries to create a space for interesting, insightful conversations like the ones that we have here. So head over to the link in the pinned comment and in the description to get your chance to say what you think.
And we're doing things a little bit differently this week. Now, we're interviewing Lou Perez, who is a comedian, which is going to be a great interview and you're going to love it. However, we are going to be talking about the coronavirus on this week's QT because the world is fucking ending, and why not?
Yeah, let's have a chat about how we're all about to die. So head over to the link in the pinned comment and we'll see you there. The top 5 answers will get pinned and discussed in next week's stream. So enjoy the show, enjoy the episode with the brilliant Lou Perez of We the Internet.
What's up?
Doug Allen is about to bring it again.
Dating is hard.
He's not holding back.
Especially if you're dating a straight white man.
Because this time, he's taking on a sacred cow.
You go on 2 dates with a straight white man and they think, welp, I guess I own you now.
The one thing you are not allowed to make fun of.
Ladies, you ever try to get into bed with a straight white man? It's weird. You can't fit, because that motherfucker's privilege is taking up half the bed.
Doug Allen presents Straight White Men.
Hello and welcome to TRIGGERnometry. I'm Francis Foster.
I'm Konstantin Kisin.
And this is a show for you if you're bored with people arguing on the internet over subjects they know nothing about. At TRIGGERnometry, we don't pretend to be the experts, we ask the experts.
Our fantastic guest this week is the producer and head writer at We the Internet, Lou Perez. Welcome to TRIGGERnometry.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's great to have you. I've been watching your videos and really enjoying them, but for anyone who doesn't know what you do, just tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. WeTheInternetTV is a comedy news channel. We mostly do political satire. We take on politics and culture and that sort of thing. And we're available on YouTube, Facebook, all online social media platforms.
And you've got an interesting angle. Like I was showing the guys some of your stuff. It was really funny. Like you were talking, there was this bit about an edgy comedian,
Doug Allen.
Yeah.
For those of you, across the pond who aren't familiar with the edgiest comedian who dares to make fun of people like Donald Trump and all that, that's Doug Allen. And that came out of, there's a writer named Luke Spolino. So he and I both developed Doug Allen. And we put on these fake comedy trailers for Doug Allen's stand-up specials where he's saying outrageous, edgy stuff that no one is brave enough to say. And what's amazing is the amount of people who watch it and think that it's real. Like, it's gotten to the point where they're like, oh, you see that on late night television all the time, man. Like, this is ridiculous. And then, like, going into the comments and, like, trying to actually deal with these people. So occasionally you'll have someone, you'll call them out and be like, hey, he's not a real character. And then they'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe I fell for it. Then other people just, sort of dig in. They're like, you guys suck, So.
Well, our friend who created the character Titania McGrath, Andrew Doyle, he has the very same thing with Titania. Like, he posts the most outrageous things, like, there's nothing white about me except my skin color or something like that. And he gets loads of people taking it at face value. It says quite a lot, I think, about where we are culturally. But in terms of We the Internet, what's the kind of angle that you guys are coming at things from? Yeah,
so we describe ourselves as equal opportunity offenders. When you're making fun of politics, we're dealing with a lot of competition, right? So you have professionals in late night television, you have comedy shows and all that, and everybody is going after the same material. So it's sort of our job to see what angle isn't being taken, to try to be funny and original and have original takes on it. So that's sort of where we're at.
Because a lot of, from what I see, comedy, and particularly like the late night shows, the Tonight Show, they tend to have a liberal bent to them. But I don't see a lot of conservative comedy coming from the US. Would you describe yourself as being a conservative outlet?
Well, it's tough now to know what conservative means, because I have so many friends of mine who are liberals, Democrats, and they tell me they're like, Lou, I believe the same exact things I believed 5 years ago, but for some reason, if I talk about them, I'm worried that I'm going to get in trouble. So it's sort of like people are being, I don't know, kind of pushed into the conservative, the conservative bent or whatever that, or
They're being labeled as conservatives.
they're being labeled as conservatives without even considering themselves conservatives. There's a lot of work that I've done in the past. Like I got my first job out of college. I wrote erotic fiction for a living. I wrote dirty stories for a living. Like that was my first job. That's not really a job that I would say a conservative would really take, writing. So I can't believe there's no reason for me to bring that up. But,
well, we're glad you did.
Yeah, just in case the comedy thing doesn't work out. I want everybody to know that I could go that route again and write dirty stories.
That's the only reason you've come on Trigonometry. You wanted some jobs doing that. Yeah.
Exactly. My erotic fiction career needs to be picked up again.
It's funny that you say that because we have a kind of more libertarian comedian in this country, Simon Evans, who used to write pornography for a living.
Yeah,
Do you know this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe that's why you kind of said you're a libertarian, which no one in the UK knows what it means. But
it means you're problematic.
Very, very problematic. Well, even in the United States, libertarians, people don't necessarily know what that is. So I think sometimes libertarians will be labeled Republicans who smoke weed, like that, which is a very oversimplified way of putting it. For me, as a small L libertarian, I'm not a part of the Libertarian Party. My whole thing comes down to this idea of voluntary exchange between people. That I don't want any initiation of force. I don't want people forcing others to do their bidding. And I sort of take that from the personal, the personal place between this is all voluntary, and then sort of expand that to groups and et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of times that includes, for the most part, things like smaller government and rights as far as what you can and cannot put in your body. The idea is if you're not hurting anybody else, you should be able to put whatever you like in your body, that sort of thing.
And so what challenges do you face when it comes to writing political comedy? Because to write, for instance, a Trump joke is phenomenally difficult because there's so many people, like you said, going after the same terrain. Yeah,
I think it's like anything. Being original is a tough point, but then also being able to do a joke and not lose the audience right from the get-go. So sometimes there'll be videos that we put out and people are like, oh, this is just right-wing propaganda. And it's like, well, I didn't really consider it right-wing propaganda. I thought it was me taking an idea and developing it and trying to do something with it. And then other times, they're like, we'll be called, you libtards, which is, do you guys have libtards here?
I'm a libtard.
Are you a libtard?
You're really not, but yeah.
I want to take that back for libertarians.
Yeah.
Like I want libtard to be the libertarian thing. It's not working out well in the U.S. But it's funny. It's like depending on which. If you have a weird, nuanced view of the world, I think people are so used to everybody sort of being in a box where if you believe this, you must believe this, this, and this. Therefore, I can see one thing that you did over here and make all these sweeping assumptions about where you fall on these other political issues.
Do you want to? Okay.
I usually it's me interrupting you, so
Yeah.
I'll be the gentleman.
Okay, yeah, it's unusual to hear a Russian use a word that gentleman. But anyway, the question I was going to ask you is, so how do you approach your comedy in the sense that normally when you're a political comedian, you have a political agenda. So you're a left-wing comedian, that's your left-wing agenda or whatever else. Do you have a political agenda or is it just finding the funny?
I think it's just, for me, it's finding the funny. A lot of stuff that I do, I also do stand-up as well. So. Yeah. When I'm on stage, a lot of things are, self-deprecating humor, I guess, if you want to call it that, or talking about things in my own life. And I feel like a lot of times when it comes to political humor, there's this risk of going full-blown activism. And I think when you go full-blown activism, people can sniff it out. And then it's like, well, now I'm no longer seeing an act, or I'm no longer hearing jokes. I'm hearing, an activist speak. And that's something that I'm trying that, I think everybody should be really conscious of when they're doing that.
Well, it's like you said, though, it's becoming quite difficult because I do political comedy as well. And the problem is that whenever, making fun of a politician or a political movement or a party or whatever, it's now automatically interpreted as criticism. And it used to be, I feel, that you could make fun of both sides, and if you kind of went through your 10 or 15, 20, whatever minute set or an hour show, and you kind of punched at everybody, that was fine. But now people will just go, oh, you made this one joke about Trump or one joke about Hillary or one joke about whoever, and that's you now. And now we've disagreed with you, and now, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times political comedy is supposed to be this idea of holding up a mirror to society. And I think one thing we have to be careful of is to remember to actually turn that mirror around and look at ourselves and be like, ooh, I don't have all the answers, and I don't necessarily know. I don't know what's going on with everything.
Well, we had an incident very recently, actually, in this country where a comedian who hosts the only real equivalent we have to your late shows, who was doing a show to a group of people who were kind of the blue collar type of audience at a charity gig, and he was doing his very anti-Brexit material, which I guess would be a bit like doing anti-Trump material, in the Rust Belt somewhere, something like that. And he got pelted with bread and booed off stage. And it was really the first time that I think it's the first time that that's really happened. A couple of other people have been talking about it. So it seems like it's becoming very polarized in that way. And I think, like you said, comedians maybe need to take a bit more responsibility as well for just being activists on stage rather than just doing jokes, right?
Yeah. Well, also, I think we're in really weird times where, like in the United States, if you are a Trump supporter, people are support him so much where it's become almost a sort of a personality trait in a way, where they don't trust the mainstream media, and sometimes there's good reason to be skeptical of stories that you're seeing in the media, but they don't trust the media so much that they start to take any form of criticism as a personal attack. And I've noticed that, with my own stuff, where fans who have been following me and really enjoy when I make fun of social justice warriors or when I make fun of Antifa, the second I make a joke about Trump, it's like, oh, I'm done with you guys. It's over. And it's like, really, this is what this one punchline, that's all it took for you to think that I'm garbage now, I'm no longer worthy of having you around. And it's a little scary because I fear that the divisiveness is just gonna keep separating us until we can't tell what is a joke and what is true, what's fact, what's fiction, and all that. And we're not talking, and I think that's a really big problem.
And do you think audiences have become more sensitive since you've been... So, for instance, when did you start stand-up? Or comedy? I
started comedy, I think maybe like 17 years ago. I started in college, and I started with improv and sketch comedy. Yeah. And then I've been doing stand-up, I think, for probably like 10 years or so. And
in that time, so you're mainly New York-based.
Yeah.
You must have seen audiences change. Do you think we've become more sensitive as a society and as an audience in a comedy club, or do you think things have remained kind of similar?
I'm not sure. I wonder. It might be that nowadays you have an outlet to talk about your sensitivity. Whether it's going on social media and talking about a comedian that you saw. I'm not sure. I think it almost seems like it used to be if you were offended by a joke or you found something that was like, oh, that's just wrong, you would say, I'm not into that, and then move on. Whereas now it's almost like it's incumbent upon you to talk about how offended you are and how wrong that joke was. I'm not sure. Yeah.
You have to call it out now.
Call it out. Yeah. Where now you can. That's sort of your way of being part of the fight in a way.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily that more people are becoming offended. It's more that when people are, they amplify that to a great degree. I mean, look, in London, I know I speak to a lot of people, and Francis hosts a lot of different shows at some of the better clubs in London. I speak to other people.
Best clubs. Sorry, Gary.
No, well done, but not factually accurate, but it's a good joke. But you talk to people who host shows or MC shows like that, and the level of complaints about a comedian being whatever, offensive in some way, has never been higher. Even as comedian, we're becoming increasingly careful about the kind of stuff that we do. So certainly in this country, it has been happening. I don't know whether it's the case in New York or elsewhere in these states.
Yeah, I haven't. Luckily, I haven't experienced it that much. I have a friend of mine who owns a club, and it'd be interesting to hear what he has to say because.
Well, let's get him on TRIGGERnometry.
I know.
We should have had him. Damn, we got you.
I know.
No.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where also how do you quantify it too? You know, if you have 200 people packed into a room and 5 of them leave a terrible review, are we to assume that the other 195 either had a good time or they had an okay time, or some of them had a bad time, but they were so offended and so traumatized that they're not even able to talk about it? I don't know.
And don't you think it's also part of comedy's remit to offend, to push the boundaries? I remember the first time I saw Chris Rock is when he did the whole black people routine.
Sure.
And
do you want to do that routine?
Yeah, let's do it. In my voice, it will sound fucking excellent. That'll be one way to end the channel. Anyway, and I was there was about 8 people in the room. I was in university, and I was the only white guy in the room, and we were watching it. And I was watching the reaction from everybody else, and I was like, are you allowed to laugh at this? Am I allowed to laugh at this? Black people laughing at it? Is a white person allowed to? Isn't that the purpose of comedy? To test the boundaries?
Well, racism.
Yeah, exactly. To test
the boundaries of
Test the boundaries of racism.
Of what is and isn't acceptable, and aren't we making things too safe at the moment?
Well, I think comedy is a way to go after sacred cows, right? So whatever the sacred cow is, it's sort of might be the duty of a comedian. And you can volunteer for the job to take on whatever that sacred cow is. And I remember talking to people about that Chris Rock bit, and apparently it took him a really long time to get it to the point where it wasn't offensive to also black audiences. Yeah. Apparently he was working on that material a lot, and it wasn't working in black rooms. So I think there's something there to being willing to fail as well. Yeah. I'm sure if you guys look at your notebooks and just how many jokes are just they were great in your head, or even like, oh man, this is going to piss some people off, or and then you go and you do it live, and you're like, oh, what a waste of my life. That was just the worst.
No, it never happened.
Never happened.
No,
never
it's all gold, man.
Never
all
in the best clubs.
The better clubs.
But also, I think it comes down to, how are you going to choose on, what art to, to spend your time looking at or listening to. I want it to be something that I haven't heard before, something that. The best thing about laughter is when it's uncontrollable. So, even some of the most horrendous jokes, if it got you laughing, it's like it did something, right?
Yeah.
Well, the thing with the Chris Rock bit is really interesting what you say there about him having to work on it for a long time. This is where I feel the issue maybe is that if you need to work on a routine, which we will do, to try and find that place between funny and offensive where it sits just right, you're going to have to go to, this is just offensive at some point, right? And you have to have the space to do that. If you don't have that opportunity, then there's going to be routines that are never going to be born because they're going to be just killed at birth because you go, oh no, it's too offensive. I can't try this out, and you can't get it to its logical conclusion. Yeah,
the challenge is there too because it's not like all subjects are equal. Obviously it's a lot. It's much easier to talk about a relationship like a bad date than it is to talk about a bad date that leads to an abortion. Like, ooh, that's it, right? No, I mean that
it's true.
It's a tough one. So there's a challenge there. Well, how do you make these really sensitive, controversial subjects palatable and funny? there are people who can do it and others who can't, and others who are like, I don't even want to touch that.
I find the whole, Chappelle special thing very, very interesting. As in, the mainstream media's reaction to it, as opposed to, the average punter or audience member who loved it. And I mean, the thing that summed it up the best was a Rotten Tomatoes review from the critics and then the audience rating.
Right. Yeah. And that was in Sticks and Stones.
Yeah.
Right. And I wasn't looking forward to seeing the special or anything like that. I had no interest in seeing it. It's on Netflix, and Netflix is just full of, there's so many specials, and I'm like, I can't get to all of them. The only reason why I watched it was because of the controversy. Everybody talking about it, And then finally I watched with my wife, and like every 5 minutes I'm cracking up and like bawled over in laughter. And it's like, yeah, that's what it's supposed to do. I would love to actually, it would be great if all the critics who panned it, it would be great to set up a camera in the room when they were actually watching the special and see how many of them were actually laughing. But afterwards they're like, well, no, I have to pretend like I wasn't laughing. It's not right for me to agree with this comedy special.
Have you met a lot of critics, Lou?
I haven't.
No, this is why you think that. If you meet critics, they're people who have absolutely no sense of humor by and large.
Oh, no.
Like there's a guy here, the Guardian in the UK, who, oh, what a funny guy. He's known for having absolutely no sense of humor. So like he's known for coming into a show, watching it for an hour, and like people will say, yeah, he smiled twice. I think he's going to give it a good review. So that we are in a position where there's a lot of people who are judging comedy who don't seem to enjoy it, which is why Chappelle and Jimmy Carr and they get very bad reviews, and a lot of it seems to be quite political, like coming back to what we were talking about earlier. But talking about sacred cows, what kind of stuff are you interested in going at the moment? What kind of stuff are you working on with We the Internet?
Yeah, so we released a video not too long ago titled "Hire Minorities to Voice Your Minority Opinions." So
that's what we've done in the show, man. I'm the foreigner here, so I can talk.
You're a refugee, right?
Yeah,
right?
Well, not quite, but
not quite.
Yeah.
Just pretend.
Yeah, that's a good.
Just go.
I'm a refugee, guys. I escaped war-torn Russia.
That's it.
There you go.
The idea being, if you're a straight white cis male, oftentimes there are certain subjects that you're not allowed to have an opinion on. So this service will allow you to select a member of that marginalized group to express the same exact opinion, and it'll be taken seriously because it has the authority of coming from a person of that class.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's something that subject in particular is something that I've noticed over the years, because people often begin a sentence with, speaking as a person of color, or speaking as a woman, or speaking as a man of faith, but no one ever starts by saying, speaking as a stupid person. No one ever admits that, that there are certain identity markers that you'll lead with, but you'll never lead with, a state of ignorance. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about, before I get going here.
That's a very, very Bill Burr technique. The fact is like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to hit you with this stuff anyway.
Yeah. Is that like an example of Socratic irony? Yeah. Like, I'm an idiot, guys, and now I'm going to hit you with some really some wisdom here.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about Burr just very, very briefly, because in this era of political correctness and, where you can't say this and you should apologize, if you're a straight white man, we've heard enough of your voices. It's ironic, isn't it, that actually probably one of the biggest comedians of his generation is a guy who goes on stage and is entirely unapologetic for being a straight white man. And I think to myself, do you think that's part of the reason why Burr has, resonates so hard?
Oh, I'm not sure if it's that necessarily. I think Burr just has a great track record of just doing really great bits, bits that kill in any room. Whether it's an urban room, if it's a white room or like that, his stuff just transcends I think it transcends, even the racial stuff transcends race, because it's sort of like these universal ideas. One of the coolest things, when I was living in Los Angeles, I got to host a show where Bill Burr was a special guest, like unannounced guest, and he did 20 minutes goofing on Michelle Obama, the first lady, in a room in Los Angeles where obviously it's a very left-leaning room, and he was able to do this material and get everybody cracking up. And I think his approach has just always been so good too. And it might be some of that, hey, I'm an idiot, I don't know what I'm talking about. And then hitting you with it.
He's just a very skilled comedian, isn't it? But I'm Francis, I have to say I'm disappointed in you for forgetting to point out one of the greatest comedians in the history of comedy, Hannah Gadsby.
Oh, right. Yeah. Have you seen her special?
I haven't seen the special, but I saw her TED Talk about
same thing
about the
same
special.
thing.
Yeah. What do you guys think of the special? Is it worth?
I never actually saw it.
Did you not?
No, I never saw it. It's one of those things. The moment something becomes extremely hype and polarizing on both sides, I just wait for it to, in a couple of years, and I evaluate it on its own merits.
Well, look, it's half an hour of decent jokes followed by a TED Talk. So there you go.
But we are in this sort of era of sort of woke comedy, which you could say Hannah Gadsby is the apex of, and she has her critics. But what is undeniable is that she has resonated. She sells out tours, there's thousands and thousands of people who've watched her special. Number one, what is woke comedy, and why do you think it's resonated, and why do you think people enjoy it?
I'm not sure what woke comedy is.
Oh, there we go.
And none of your questions are completely useless, therefore.
No, well, it might be some. I think what's great about doing comedy today is, from we have the technology where anybody who wants to do comedy can do it. They could start their own podcast or vlog and all that, and it's helped to get rid of the gatekeepers. Because there might be certain gatekeepers where Hannah Gadsby would never be able to get to where she is today, like selling out arenas and all that thing. And I think no matter what you think about Hannah Gadsby or what you think about Bill Burr or Dave Chappelle, it's wonderful to have all those choices where it's like, oh, you know what, I can go my whole life without seeing a Hannah Gadsby special, but all these people who are into that can go and support her. And I think that's something that sometimes we forget, or it's a pretty good time to be doing comedy, no matter what your comedy is.
Do you really think that? Because there's a lot of people who would argue, you can't say what you think anymore, and everything's getting shut down, and I'm oppressed, and all the rest of it. But you say it's the best possible time to be doing comedy.
I think so. I think there are just all these different avenues where you can make stuff happen, and I'll sometimes see like comedians that I know who've been in the game for 5 years or something like that, complaining about the state that they're in, like, I'm being held back, or this theater won't have me, this club won't have me, and it's like, well, you have an opportunity there to be a little bit more entrepreneurial and show people that you have an audience. If you can pack 10 people into a room every week, to see your show, and then build that up, and then build an online your online brand and all that. I think you need to do that. Excuse me. I've always sort of been of the mind that ever since I've been doing comedy, where I can't rely on gatekeepers or the people sort of in the business or in the industry. It's like I need to just be doing my own stuff, because once you start relying on other people, then you're subject to what they want and what they don't want.
I guess that's probably why you're not seeing some of the stuff that we're bringing up, because if you do what you do for yourself, just like we're doing Trigonometry, we don't answer to anybody. That gives you a level of freedom where you don't even have to worry about the stuff. But certainly in this country, I don't know whether it's the same in America. If you're just a club comedian, which there's obviously lots of, you are at the mercy of you know, the gatekeepers, as you say.
Right.
Which is why it's a great time to be doing comedy, not necessarily to be a stand-up comedian, making your way up through the standard industry, but it is a great time to be doing content, let's say.
Yeah,
right.
that's a good way to put it, because I know people in the States who are great stand-up comedians, but they have side jobs, they have side gigs, because even when things are going well and they're, you know, hitting the road and doing those road gigs, they're still not able to sustain themselves, and they need to work other jobs. So, yeah, I've never just done stand-up comedy or even tried to, you know, go that route.
You're more interested in what you're doing now with the internet.
Yeah, production and using that as a way to, you know, to book gigs and to do live shows and all that.
Oh, you guys do live shows as well?
Yeah. We did a tour, a 4-city tour back in November called "The Funny Thing About Hate Speech."
That's a great title.
Yeah.
And so, when you're looking at what is happening in the US, because everything is so ridiculous now. I mean, like, take, you know, even like, you know, like George W. Bush, when things were ridiculous and he was coming across saying ridiculous things, it was easier to parody him. But now you see Trump, and like literally yesterday, he's just been impeached. I mean, how do you satirize that? It must be impossible, isn't it?
It seems to be, very hard. Especially, I just don't have the bandwidth to be able to take everything in. You know, there are so many people who seem to live their lives on Twitter, and they're, you know, always reacting to whatever, you know, to whatever's happening. And I think Trump has done a really good job of.
We're just going to clip that, by the way.
He's done a really good. And then you'll do a montage of like children in cages and bombings and stuff like that happening. He's done a really wonderful job.
And we're just going to put that on a loop.
Oh my God. With Twitter, he's done a great job with Twitter. Yeah, he's done a really great job, you know, sort of misdirecting and diverting attention away from, you know, really important things that are happening. But I think also he's, as a libertarian, I like when people are more skeptical of the powers that be and skeptical of those in government. And you talk about when George W. Bush was president, I absolutely loved The Daily Show at that time. I loved the Colbert Report. I think the Colbert Report was on around the same time.
Well, Colbert actually made his name, if you remember, by when he was invited to speak at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
It was great, and it was probably,
I loved it.
Yeah, and then what happened was when Obama came into office, I was like, yes, they're going to continue that. They're going to continue to, you know, to speak truth to power, if you will. And we really didn't see that, and that was unfortunate. I was like, oh man, here I was sort of, you know, relying on the comedians to come and take the president to task. So I think now it's sort of the executive branch has been, you know, maybe will be a little less respected, you know, moving on, and hopefully more people are a little more cognizant of just what powers are being wielded.
And I think, you know, what you do at We the Internet is actually very valuable, because more and more people have, you know, they look at, you know, for instance, the Tonight Show, and they go, well, you know what, this clearly has an agenda. I'm now feeling that I'm being lectured to by a sort of liberal left intelligentsia, and we get it here in the UK. You know, anti-Brexit, which is fine, do anti-Brexit jokes, there are some brilliant ones. But if that is your consistent narrative, then to be brutally honest, it gets tedious. And then for somebody like We the Internet to come along who goes, look, we're going to make fun of Trump, but, you know, we're also going to make fun of Hillary. You go, how refreshing. This is what comedy should be.
Yeah, one of the things that I absolutely love is when you post something online on Facebook or whatever, and you have fans who say, yeah, normally I like your stuff, but this one was kind of meh. And then they come back and they're like, oh, I love this video though. I like to, you know, have people who are able to disagree with you but still support your work. And it's a challenge too for myself, because it's so easy to just support those who you agree with,
Yeah.
and kind of fall into that same trap. So I'm hoping that we do get to the point where more people are able to do that.
Yeah.
Well, we have that with trigonometry as well. You get people who say, "Oh, I watched your show for a year and a half or whatever, but this video,
How dare you have
This
so and so
person
on?
Yeah.
Or they'll start to we had this video, we did an interview with Posey Parker, who's a gender critical ex-feminist, and she was pretty strong, let's say. I think that's a fair statement on trans stuff. And so we kind of pushed back on her probably more than we did with others. And someone on the Mumsnet Feminist Forum went through and said, "Oh, you had, she was speaking for this many minutes, and this other person you interviewed about the same thing, they spoke for that, and it's because you're two men." And it's like, come on. But eventually, you kind of, what we always talk about is like, you have an audience that is your core audience, and over time that will shape up to be what it is. And people who thought it was like a right-wing echo chamber or this kind of echo chamber or that kind of echo chamber, they all get filtered out.
And what happened? That was taken down, right?
Yeah, it was taken down as hate speech and then eventually reinstated. Probably because there was quite a backlash against it. We were starting to get traction in the news and stuff like that. Have you ever had any problems with Facebook or anything like that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we've had problems.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had one. It was, I forget how long ago, but I ran a poll, right?
Yeah.
And I asked who was responsible for Hurricane Florence, right? And let's see. 25% of the people said Donald Trump, and the other 75% said the gays. Thank you for laughing.
Yeah, that was funny.
And there was only two options, right?
Right.
And obviously anybody reading this knew that it was a joke.
Yeah.
It was a play on who controls
Should
God,
have included Jews.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I think it was like over 10,000 people voted in this poll and shared it around. And it was taken down because it went against community standards. And it got me thinking, man, here it is, like the censors on Facebook are doing away with what's clearly satire.
Yeah.
Man, who knows what else they're doing away with? And we've had an issue recently with, we have an old video that I shot like right after, I think it must have been 2017 or something like that. Right after the inauguration, the presidential inauguration, it's making fun of Antifa. It's like, here are 6 rioting tips for Antifa. And that was flagged recently for promoting violence. And I wonder how much of it is sort of the attempt to get an algorithm that can catch every single like problematic thing. And then, you're going to have a lot of stuff that just sort of gets caught up in it that shouldn't be. But yeah, we've had issues with that, and then on YouTube as well.
In those cases, were they manually reviewed and then reinstated, or was?
I'm not sure. I think this last one we called for a manual review, and I'm not sure what's happened yet. But until then, it's we're thinking, oh no, like we have to be wary of certain keywords, violence or anything that could get picked up as potential hate speech. And it's tough when you're creating content to try to stay ahead of the curve and knowing what it is that we can and cannot publish without worrying about it being taken down.
But this is the problem with censorship, is that if it's an algorithm, which I actually, in our case, it wasn't. With the Posey Parker video, it was taken down based on a manual review of it, and then we had a manual appeal again that changed it back. But even if it's algorithms, it forces you as the person who's putting stuff out there to censor yourself.
Yeah.
And then you won't tackle the issues, like you say, the sacred cows. You'd rather stay away from it and do a video about something that's going to be less controversial.
Yeah, and when you're talking about demonetization, there are places like Prager University PragerU that talks about their videos, but a lot of people on the left who produce videos, their stuff has been demonetized as well, and it's you wonder, is it keywords, is it manual review, is there a type of vendetta? I don't know.
And do you think they've become more draconian as the years have gone by? Social media.
I think so. Yeah, and they're they're dealing with a lot. Companies like Facebook, they're dealing with having to do congressional hearings, so they have to go before Congress and answer questions. Then they're dealing with people who are using the system and hate it. And then they're also dealing with some weird stuff that they've done before regarding sharing personal information and security breaches, and then also the work that they do in other countries as well. I don't think who knows? I mean, in the United States, it's probably not as bad as it is in Saudi Arabia. If
Probably.
Yeah, probably. If Saudi Arabia has allows people to have Facebook, I don't know.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, so in terms of this, you said you had some problems on YouTube as well. Was it just demonetization, or have you had stuff taken down?
I think we've had stuff demonetized, and there was, for a little while, there was another video. It was another Antifa video. It was called "Should Antifa Stop?" And it was taken down for a little while because it was saying that it was like sort of promoting violence. And if you watch this video, "Should Antifa Stop?" It's not promoting violence. But now it was reinstated, but now it's age restricted. So you have to be 18 or older. Okay. So yeah, that's it.
Do you think we're rapidly coming to a point where people are misunderstanding irony? They just don't get it anymore. And you can make a joke that is ironic. You can put a video out that is comedic, and people will go, "Oh, we just simply will take that literally. Therefore, get rid of it."
Well, yeah. I mean, look at you have Snopes fact-checking a satirical site like the Babylon Bee, and that's almost its own case of this can't be real. I don't know what it is that why that's the case, that people just aren't getting irony. I mean,
well, we have the stereotype in Britain about Americans, that Americans don't understand sarcasm and irony. So it could just be that it's run by Americans.
Well, you guys are really good at it.
Well done.
Hey, I gotta say, you talk to enough Brits and you're like, was he making fun of me the whole time?
Yeah. It's because we're deeply emotionally repressed. And we can't actually say what we enjoy. So the only thing that we can do is just take the piss out of it.
Yeah.
Right. Be calm, carry on.
Yeah. And then, die of a heart attack. Anyway.
Be passive aggressive, carry on.
Yeah.
Be passive aggressive.
Because that's just fine.
Yeah. So where do you think the future is? Kind of the culture. It's an interesting time. We're recording this just after the election here in the UK, where the right of centre party has absolutely crushed it, and it seems like a lot of the reasons that happened was the cultural stuff to some degree. So the landscape seems to be shifting. What do you think, if this were to happen, if, let's say, Donald Trump is re-elected in 2020, which seems certainly credible as possible, what do you think the kind of cultural landscape is going to look like?
I'm afraid that things might get worse before they get better. It's almost like everybody needs to hit rock bottom before we're able to rebuild again.
Well, like an alcoholic.
Yeah. But 350 million alcoholics need to hit rock bottom. I was talking to someone who works in Silicon Valley about tech and in particular cancel culture, and I was telling him how I really would like to explore that idea of cancel culture in tech and how technology and social media has basically facilitated that, and with the hopes of, bringing our culture back to one of forgiveness, one where, hey, you posted something stupid a few years ago, we're going to let it slide and not make you lose your job, and you can go about your day. And he said, I think it's a great idea. It's not going to happen.
Really?
It's not going to happen. He's like, no, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. More people are going to be joining, mobs and trying to get rid of people and that sort of thing. And I'm like, he's like an insider.
That's great for trigonometry. So
yeah,
it's all good.
Oh, that's hopeful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we are kind of in a bunker right now. So when the bombs start falling, you guys will be safe. I don't know where I'll be.
Yeah.
No, this structure's very weak, sadly.
And this isn't going to protect you from Twitter anyway. Right?
Yeah.
No. So it's going to get worse, you think? We need to hit rock bottom. Why do you say that? Why do you think You think the polarization will continue? Is that your sense?
Yeah, I'm afraid that it will happen. And I don't. While there are a lot of people, I guess, in the States they call the exhausted majority, who are very tired of the squabbling. I wonder how many of them will be exhausted and go, to one extreme, go to one extreme or the other. I'm sorry, this is such a pessimistic view. It might be because it's raining in London for the past
Welcome to
few
England,
days.
my friend. I've lived in the shitty weather, not shitty, great country, shitty weather for 25 years now, and you never get used to it.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think the problem is with Twitter, it just emboldens shitty behaviour and narcissism. And as a result of that, I can just, and I've seen comedians go through it. They take these extreme positions and then get on a positive feedback loop where people are retweeting them and then they're getting more likes and then that encourages that position. And
It's fucking brilliant, mate. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it.
Well, I wonder too, just how many times I've tweeted something and then looked back on it a couple of weeks and think, oh, if everybody just knows me from that, it's like, oh, that's a shame, because there's a lot more to me than this shitty take.
Well, nuance is very hard, isn't it? I've thought about this often. If you just look at my Twitter feed, you would make assumptions about me that aren't true.
Yeah, they are.
All right, fine. I'm a Nazi. It's fine. Okay. Well, listen, man. It's an interesting time, and I really enjoy what you do. So please keep it up, and we'll keep watching it. The last question we always ask is, what is the one thing that we're not talking about as a society that we ought to be talking about?
Well, I think sort of with the holidays coming up, I think it's so important to really embrace the real life relationships that we have, and to let the people who are important to you know how important they are. And I don't think it happens enough. And I'm in a really great position, being able to do comedy, and I also get to have interactions with fans of mine. And a little while back, I had a fan of mine reach out on Facebook, and he, said to me something that I considered pretty heavy. He said, I'm thinking about trying comedy because I think it would give my life some meaning to create. Yeah, and you hear that and it's like, whoa, what's going on? I asked him what's going on in his life, and he said, well, for the past year or so, he's been taking care of his grandmother who has dementia, right? And I said to him, I said, man, what you're doing for your grandmother is such an incredible thing. I mean, what can be more life affirming than taking care of those who need the most? And he said, wow, thank you for reminding me of that. I didn't think about that. And I was thinking, like, here you have a young man who's doing good in the world, who's been blinded to the good that he's doing. And all he needed was one person to remind him, hey man, what you're doing is amazing. And yeah, you can do comedy too, and that could be a part of your life. But what you're doing is very meaningful and can have a big impact on people. And I just, I wish more people would do that and embrace it, because it can go a really long way.
Well, you said that with the holidays coming up, this video will probably go out after the holidays.
There's always a holiday.
If you haven't done that, you're a bad person, but try and do it now.
I love it that you deliver that message when everyone's come back from Christmas and is entirely fucking sick of their family.
You got to go back and see your family again.
No, I'd rather do comedy.
You might not have enjoyed Christmas dinner, but they are really important. So be nice.
Right.
Lou,
thanks that's where your inheritance will come from. Sorry.
This is the cynical British sense of humor. Lou, well, thanks very much for coming on, man. If people want to watch your stuff and follow you, where do they do all that?
Yeah, We the Internet TV on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and then I am Lou on the Subway on Twitter.
Perfect.
Fantastic. And as always, we'll see you in a week from now with another great episode.
Take care. See you next week, guys.
Thanks for watching, guys. As always, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the bell button next to the subscribe button so you get notified when a video comes out, and follow us on all the social media @TriggerPod.
And also leave us a nice review on iTunes and spread the word.